All right. That's live on my end.
Yep, we are live. Hello, everyone. Arcean here. Welcome to Microwave Extravaganza podcast, episode 8. It's you so articulate. And this episode features a very, and yes, I did mean that as a joke, but a very articulate African American gentleman, bodybuilder. I believe that's correct. Bodybuilder, right?
It has kind of become a bit more along those lines now that I'm getting a little too old to take the risks of wild and crazy lifting and crazy feats. Yeah.
So no more powerlifting, huh?
Well, it's mostly that there's just some things that I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do that, once you're about 40, you start to have to, okay, I'm going to do this for this season. I'm going to do this for this season, because your body just starts telling you no.
Well, time to lift up. No!
Totally.
But, yeah, so anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I would first like to thank our sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, please, we are very proud to be sponsored in parts by Generation Identity and their new plastic fences to keep migrants out. Remember, we do not need to put up a fence that will actually keep anyone else, but you always need to spend tons of money on vehicles you can't. Support the cause and buy a plastic fence today. We are also sponsored by Vegan Gains' surplus semen.
Oh my god, dude.
Soy he's been chugging down. That boy got way too much. And if you would like to have some of that vegan magic in your salad tomorrow, please pick up a nice bottle available at Walmart's, because everything's available there. And finally, by TLDR's cola flavored bleach. Have you had one of those days? Have you waken up in the middle of the night and you just want to punch a baby walrus? Well, don't worry no more. All your problems will go away with just one sip of this delicious drink. And remember, Soros Industries, I mean TLDR, wants you to drink as much bleach as possible. Thank you very much, everyone. Donovan, why don't you give everyone a little bit of an intro to
All right. Hi, I'm Donovan Worland, born and raised in San Francisco, California, and moved up to Oregon a little over a decade ago, about 13, 15 years ago, right as soon as everybody was starting to say that Arnold Schwarzenegger would be a fantastic choice to fix the reservoirs. I was like, you motherfuckers are going to die. And
maybe they thought he'd do it with his bare hands, like he was still at 2000.
Really? Yeah, totally, dude. That he was going to he was going to be like Conan, and then him and Crom were going to rebuild the water system.
He's of a diet Republican.
Crom is strong. Pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just said, do you think he's really conservative, or do you think he's the definition of the couch-bound diet conservative?
Number two, I think the fact that he married into the Kennedy family. And
what?
No, yeah. People don't realize his wife is totally like one of the children of the Kennedy. She just has a different last name. I think it was like the father was not a Kennedy, the mother was. I forget what she might even be.
Yeah, but but the father definitely was groomed by the family to definitely be one of them.
Yeah, and I swear it's like people when they think back, it was so the Kennedys they were rum runners, and they were a big part of like the Irish mob, and yeah, that's a big part of their lead up to power. A huge thing that sort of is the untold story of the Irish community is that East Coast Irish communities and just east of the Mississippi. So this is especially, you find this in Chicago, and a lot of people have been wondering about Obama it's hard to imagine. The Irish and the Blacks are two groups that people don't think of as having a history of very organized crime. But what they did is that their organized crime went into the unions and went into government. They basically found out, how do you steal? You steal by becoming a part of the government. And so, like, Obama's network are people who were post, like, 1920s, a lot of 1920, I'm sorry, like 1890s and on, or 1870s and on, immigrants of varying descents, Polish, Irish, Eastern European groups, and there were already lots of blacks in the North, and then there were more during World War I, and so the people who were already there knew. They were like, okay, that they already had their hustles. Like the autobiography of Malcolm X, he actually gets into when he used to sell drugs and what that scene was like at the beginning of the jazz days. And people aren't aware that, like, the Irish organized very well, got into law, the unions. To now we're seeing they got into the Blacks and Irish mafia. They ended up getting into especially HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and then contractors. Anybody who's ever dealt with dirty contractors, that you've known, there's this rumor of Irish contractors who will go around the country ripping people off. And it's like, I've talked to Irish people who are second generation. They're like, that's not a rumor. Like, I know people like that, and you'll never find them again. They'll cheat you once and you'll never find them. And I thought it was just really funny. And so, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger was, that was his scene. That was his scene, basically.
It's like a hydra. It's just one after the other. But I mean, do you think that? So I guess there's no longer officially organized crime with the black community. I think that maybe. Do you think that part of the reason why they gave so many incentives to be lazy to the black community, so that way no other kind of criminal organization could screw up what the black mafia was doing in government? Kind of like, a way of like, hey, we got power now, let's make sure no one else can. You think that?
There's that, and also there's this writer Thomas Sowell who actually has gotten to a lot of the groups, the separate groups that after the 60s, or not the 60s. It was really about the 1920s that you start to get the Great Migration. You start to get these really odd groups, like the Moorish Science Temple, this guy Noble Drew Ali, and the Circle 7 Quran. So these people tried to rewrite the sort of a mystical Freemasonic history of black people. So this is where you get the flying pyramids and the We Was Kang stuff.
Oh my God.
It's that old. It goes back to like the early 1900s, and like these were a lot of Northerners, a first generation of sort of literate Southern blacks educated by whites from New England, who started massive projects of literacy in the South. And that's where you get like, say in Washington, a result of this would be Dunbar High School. There's a number of black colleges. They're just, it's escaping me specifically. There's Oberlin. Oberlin is one of them. And so they were these academies of like the next generation of black literati that would be, this was the hope. This was the great hope, and to some degree, it worked during the Harlem Renaissance.
Do you think that that works itself into the slogan of the Obama administration, hope and change?
Yes, that idea of looking back, and this is why also I sometimes caution the alt-right on this, is, look back to what we once were. If only we could be like we were then. And that's why you're getting the We Was Kangs, because they're looking back at basically a history that is a simulacrum, as Alexander Dugin would say. It's a simulacrum, that it wasn't really, they weren't like this mystical kind of thing. These were like poor Southern rural people in finally meeting people who were 3-4 generations literate and used to the northern white populations and completely integrated. Like nobody thought anything really of the black populations in the north. The Great Migration massively changed stuff. Like who's that guy? Naked Ape actually has done fantastic work on, or I'm sorry, Alternative Hypothesis.
I was going to say, because Naked Ape hasn't been active for a while, so I was a little confused there, but go on.
Yeah, it's all alt hype. He's the one who really has gotten into that change that happened in the Great Migration, changes in law, a lot of the Jim Crow laws. Like in the South, people violated Jim Crow laws left and right. Nobody cared. It was really in the North, these cities run by the Democrats. This is the period where socialism is coming in with populations familiar with it from Europe. And they're starting to unionize all in one shot. And this is and I think at this point we execute Sacco and Vanzetti, so we're knocking off anarchists. We're not allowing people who are anarchists and communists into the country. And so these ideas, this milieu of all these revolutionary ideas and this mystical kind of stuff, it is mostly upstate New York. And in that milieu of literati, and so it spreads from there through like the beatniks and jazz people, and so you'll even find as time, if you find writers who are like the cool philosophers, they liked a bit of jazz, they liked a bit of this, you'll find almost universally these people are into Freemasonry, into the goddess religions. They were really
like the sacred feminine, which a lot of people don't realize was the start of. I learned this from Rocking Mystery, but that was a start. That was a start of feminism. It was the idea that God is a tyrant and female is the victim.
Yes, and that's the embracing then of Isis, and you see like writings like Blavatsky would have been a generation prior to that. So by the this is brilliant, and what was it? Manly P. Hall, who, he was speaking into the 70s, he actually put it as that ISIS Unveiled reads, it reads like a doctrine. And I know, right? And that was the whole, so you'll even find like all the way back to like I didn't really put a lot of this together until people like Rocking Mystery and other people started to map out the history of the occult movement and the history of these secret societies, civil societies.
Do you mind? I actually am a Mason, but only a first degree entered apprentice.
Oh, how is it going?
Not bad, not bad. What the feel I got from them was that if there is an agenda, it's really up top, not at the base, not at the local lodge level. And in fact, one of our favorite jokes is, by the way, okay, so the picnic's going to be on Saturday. Now, what do we do about Syria?
Wait, when am I going to get my superpowers? So that's, yeah. Like, when do I get to go to the secret bunker?
When do I enter the Chamber of Secrets?
I actually have, oh gosh, just so you know, I have literally, Morals and Dogma, Manly P. Hall's Freemasonry, like, oh wait, you might like this. I don't know if you could see it. Let me grab this real quick.
I see you got a fedora in the background.
Pardon?
I see you got a fedora in the background.
I know, totally. It got so sun bleached and fucked up looking that I finally was like, this is just too shitty looking to wear. And then people started talking about fedoras, and I'm like, whoa. Not wanting to be a meme, and that was years ago. That was a number of years ago. But
it look good if you like. That's the thing. There's an article of clothing that like these beta males they see some cool dude wearing it, and they have no idea why it looks good on them, and so they just ruin it.
I know that. I was kind of thinking the same thing. And I'm like, oh man, and I'm like, no, you should wear your hat, and then at some point, I just looked at it, and I'm like, I just need a new one, straight up. I just need a new hat. And, I've been around, like I looked into the lodge. And so, like when you've seen men top notch dressed, you know, like when they show up to lodge, those fuckers are looking right and tight. You know, the ties.
Yeah, they got everything. They look like they're a part of a foreign military.
Totally. And that's just was one of those moments where it hit me where I'm like, this hat makes me look like a bumpkin. You know, like it's so messed up. You know, and it was, but I want to show you this. You could actually find this on Amazon. It's relatively rare. Allegorical Conversations Arranged by Wisdom. So this is basically the French. So it's French. Let me show it to you. You'll totally pick out some of this. So it'll have the conversation in French on one side, and then the other part in that corresponding part of the right on the other page. So you could actually see what some of the terms were in French. And, you know, and it's all the kind of stuff. Why are the sun and moon representing your lodge? Why a globe? Why is the purpose of the trowel? You know,
I know about all that. You know, I've been trying to practice the greeting. There's a special greeting that we have. Can't say exactly what it is, but you know. And the thing is, I don't think the Masons are satanic by nature, by an organization themselves. But I think they're a very easy to corrupt organization at the top. And that's the thing. It's like the Catholic Church. You know, they're the Pope, a fucking globalist. But the church itself is just an institution. It's not designed to be like that. Like a lot of people think, oh, they're Satan worshippers, or oh, they're a bunch of atheists. But you have to believe in a supreme being in order to join. No atheists are allowed.
Yeah. I got to admit, at the time I was looking into it, I still had not really understood the true import of the concept of the unity, of that there's a one united being, and I had not really clarified that, you know, perfected my understanding of, no, I definitely believe in a power beyond myself. I was still, you know, like, oh, look into this, and you know, and I was like, every once in a while, still looking at La Droite Humaine, you know, the French, basically the French lodges, you know, and stuff, and then at some point, I just was like, no, I don't know. What I want is to understand the secrets. I should first listen to what Masons are interested in,
and why.
Then I could at least look into that, because they're more than willing to talk to you about all kinds of fascinating subjects, you know. And I was like, the right is the right of their fraternity. And I was like, and I have to understand that I am literally joining a brotherhood. So it's a stage of life. It's a choice I'm making for life. It's that kind of thing. So I was like, I should really be absolutely sure of what is going on, you know, and really know about it. And so that's why I've spent years looking into now years and years of different rites, like Swedenborgian rite and other stuff.
Right, I mean, right, the Yorkshire rite. I think the Templars are a Christian sect of that, actually. They came after the Pope disbanded them and tried to have them all killed. The Masons gave them asylum, and that's part of the reason why they're so hated by the church. Which they never tell you, you know.
Everything I've found from Born in Blood, John J. Robinson's book, or only recently have Masons started openly bringing his findings up in lodges and then publicly presenting it in lectures. And a lot of them are pretty darn convinced of John J. Robbins from his work, that he's like, no, this does look like French Templars brought a portion of the fleet to Scotland. Scotland held, you know, they held back the British. That gave them 300 years of gestation in Scottish culture, and then from there it was 300 years later that when the English took over, and then after that you had the English declare the public, you know, publicly the lodges existing. That if you ever want, oh my God, there's this one lecture you got to see. It's the history of Freemasonry in Scotland on the Lewis Masonic channel. The guy's hilarious.
I'm gonna type that in. Hold on. So the history of Freemasonry, you say?
Oh, in Scotland.
In Scotland.
And it's on the Lewis Masonic channel on YouTube. Great lecture. because he gets into, by the time the lodges declared in Britain became public, that's 4 lodges. He said at that time in Scotland there were 400.
Lewis Masonic.
Oh yes, Lewis Masonic.
All right. I'm just loading it, but we'll see that in a second. Just so we don't want the whole thing to get taken up, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, do what you need to do. It's mostly I just wanted to point out, like, it's a great, it's fantastic because he actually presents the tradition from the point of view of like just a very local Scotsman, and why, like, at one time, say, a lodge was no greater than 40 men. And he said it's simply, you only can really know 100. So, and your town was only so large. And he goes, that it just suited that you would start a different lodge someplace else if there were greater than 40 men, because it was so hard to assemble everybody. And it was really a lot of practical things, a lot of the cultural practicality parts. But then also he gets into the actual stone masonry, where the lodges that still exist to this day, they do not allow anyone but a true stone mason.
Whoa, like someone who actually practices masonry?
Yeah, and and you have to work in the field and everything.
I missed that those operative masons were around for the longest time. I kind of missed that.
Same. I honestly think I honestly kind of so there's been some articles that now and then I had read, and there was somebody who he was an older mason who was from America, and he had said that he just started at one point, in his kind of retirement days, started just fiddling with stone, seeing what it was like, and he said that it so much of the rite made sort of more sense to him once he started working with stone regularly, just practicing, what it's like to actually make a perfect cube, and things like that. And I thought it was a very interesting, it was an interesting article. That's one of the things I like about with the Freemasons, that when they are very open about this is an experience that truly changed my mind, changed my heart, made me look into life more deeply. And so that's why it's hard for me to just dismiss it as it's the synagogue of Satan. I'm more like, I can't take something away from
synagogue of Satan.
And my thing is, I'm like, I can't take something away from guys that, like, I don't know. It's like me talking about a kung fu school that I've never trained in that style. Like, I don't know what you all do. I don't know how important it was to you. It's hard for me to just point at something and say, fuck that. I've gotten too old to just know that works, Yeah.
I think that, this is something that I think Mr. E has even talked about on his channel about how the left-hand path wants you to stay ignorant, and they don't want you to investigate these things for yourself. So yeah. What do you think, man?
Well, I can see one thing that he's talking about. There is a tendency of people who are too interested in mysticism to get caught up in sort of the fancy language. They never take, say, our classical terminology for things, like how in the old days, tolerance, the term for it being rooted in the word for pain, really has more to do with you are enduring something that you don't like, and you are enduring it only for endurance's sake. It makes you a better person to endure, to tolerate, rather than what has really become, and I would say, I would blame this on Freemasons who got into education and took the mystical socialist milieu a little too far, where they took tolerance as you could have, wild and crazy ideas or behavior, and that's okay. You know, you could dance naked on drugs in the middle of the street. You know, that's, you know, as long as you're not hurting anybody. You know, like almost, you know, and it became that in our society. You know, I wouldn't say that's the point.
Go far with that to the point of stupidity. I mean, I know they have their heart in the right place, but at some point you got to be like, do you really want children to be able to see this degeneracy?
Totally.
Yeah.
And also a big part of this too is, and you probably have noticed this. This is one of those things that I'm not going to bring up all the various rumors that come up about various people who are popular in the alt-right, but anytime stuff becomes like a group or a body, it starts trying to organize itself. There are going to be people who the power is, it's kind of fun to have that power. And, you know, and they are, yeah. And so they're going to not exactly take advantage of it, but do things that people would say, I'm trying to model my behavior on what you do or what you say, and I can't agree with that decision you made. And that I think to some degree, as Freemasonry became huge in our society, I mean, like, people have no clue how big of a deal it is to the Republic, the history of the Republic.
Was to be a Mason in the right groups, like to the right people. You were essentially, it was like wearing an army uniform. It was so well respected. It was so well loved immediately, because it took quite a bit to get in, and it meant a lot of stuff. It was an instant status quo to show that you had something about you that was unique.
Yes, and that you were trusted in the basically you were trusted within the clan of the men.
By the way, I DM'd you like the link to the not to the Hangout, but to the podcast itself, so that way people can watch it live. So if you could tweet that out.
Oh, sure thing. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. But one thing I wanted to definitely talk about was when it comes to the whole IQ levels between the different races, I don't see why, it's like, I think that the alt-right puts the cart before the horse. I see absolutely that, like, black people tend to, on average, be lower IQ than people of white and Asian descent. But I don't think it happens because of their race. I think it's almost really more because of another thing that also affects race, like something else above it. And what I think it is I think it's geographical location. I think the location that has hotter climates, maybe some of those people there had less advanced cultures, and because cultures that are nearby each other, like like for instance, the Dutch are very similar to the Germans. The Congolese are very similar to the Somalians in some sense. Because they all kind of were geographically close to each other, they learn from each other. Therefore, the lack of learning that happens in one African nation probably affected the whole of them. And, that's why you see people of a very similar skin color who live in an area that's physically hot being less intelligent. But I don't see why being black, having more melanin by itself would do that,
Actually, here's something that it was so Thomas Sowell really nailed something that, and it's something that never comes up enough. And I'm glad kind of this came up. Almost the entire continent of Africa has no year-round rivers. Without year-round rivers, this means there's almost no people on that entire continent who've ever used water power. Because there's no year-round rivers, this would then also give the suggestion of, if there's no year-round rivers, then there's no mountain ranges to stop the clouds so that it rain. There's no rain shadows, and so what you end up getting is this unbelievably flat, arid continent that, and I mean, just the shocking mass of land that has very few hills or mountain, and I don't know of any.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, so few people know how big Africa is. They think, okay, it's a little bigger. It's like, if you look at it, like, no, it's giant.
Yeah, it's 5 times like the United States contiguous states. I think could fit in like 4 or 5 times, I believe. And this is also the problem that's facing, say, people like the Russians and the people of the steppes. This is such a huge expanse, and to traverse it is like, I mean, is a human, just a massive human feat to traverse these spaces. With Africa, these are people that, with modern warfare and weaponry, they cannot deal with the megalithic predators. This is something I think people should like think through. They have Kalashnikovs, AK-47s on flags. These people know what a gun is.
And they're not the problem. They're the full auto motherfuckers, and they're one of the places where most people go to buy illegal weapons. They're not unarmed.
And if you plant crops, the likelihood that an elephant or some other very dangerous animal will come along and eat all of it or menace your fields is huge. And it took like people who had been dealing with this for over 1,000 years. The Europeans, they had already dealt with this. They had cleared their region of the world of megalithic predators. They had domesticated them. You know, they'd taken a wolf and made it into a corgi. And so when they so they bring all these crops and settlements to Africa. Africa then is abundant with food. And so here's the thing is, if anybody were to look up, say, the music of Africa from about the 40s through the 70s, when you really start getting modern recording and everything, some of this stuff was top tier Latin jazz. They had the Cuban sound down, like, and that was tough to get and to really get, like, I mean, whole orchestras of it, and all this vanished within one generation. And a lot of people don't know, it was the ethno-nationalist movements of Africa were communist in nature, and then they were being aided by Islamists.
Oh,
and
geez.
Yeah.
That's a terrifying idea. One of the most violent and anti, not like women like dominance, but like anti-woman religions mixed with one of the most disgusting ideologies in the world.
Yeah,
that should, like, the economy of the shittiest economic plan and mixed with the most hateful religion. That's
totally. And then on top of it, like, so you have and so then there's another issue that a lot of people like. So when you don't have water power, this means it takes so long for you to traverse space. To traverse space is so dangerous in that continent, and the tribes don't necessarily. Some tribes will be fine side by side. Others, like, say, like the Zulus are notorious for being like violent and warrior, tribe, and esteeming that. And so Europe sort of dealt. They just had different influences, but it also helps that people could basically live in a valley, and nobody can get to them. In Europe, they could go to the top of a mountain and no one can get to them. In Africa, it's just not the same thing, and there's no water navigation. So you never have to. You don't have a reading of the star systems, the math that traversing water takes, stone masonry, the weight of blocks, measuring blocks. Without those. Like, and people would think, well, that comes out of like almost the Stone Age. Bingo. Without Stone Age level calculation and technology, you could have people who will perpetually live in the Stone Age.
Exactly. People forget that. It's like learning a martial art. You have to start with step one.
Bingo. You got to be able to punch. It starts with a straight punch. Yeah.
And you know what? That's the thing. So many people wonder, why is it that Egypt looks so different from Africa today? Like, and I'm not talking like modern day Egypt, which looks a lot better than a lot of other African nations, but I'm talking like ancient Egypt had pyramids, irrigation systems, and advanced language, all sorts of other technologies. And you realize they're the ones who took advantage of the Nile. They knew how to get it to they took advantage of the flood, but they had they had places where they would keep the water after the flood went away, so that way they could have water year round. They communicated, like they had horses and everything like that, and they were right next to the sea, so they could go across to Europe. These people had pretty much almost a Middle Eastern advantage,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, if we were to really kind of think of an era of time that really the Egyptians kind of make more sense in, would have to be, I mean, we're thinking of people of the Greek world, that they would have been very familiar with the things the Greeks thought. And the Greeks, of course, their whole thing of philosophy was sort of their take on the sort of mysteries of Egypt. But at a certain stage, by the time if I remember correctly, by the time you get, I think, like Plato and Socrates, if I remember right, Egypt, the ancient system, was already starting to fade. Like they were already starting to change ethnically because people would go to Egypt. They were like, Cairo is a place to be.
Muslims, right? I think, right?
Way before then. I mean, this would have been Greek peoples from Syria, Lebanon. You have Joseph. The story of Joseph going there. So Jews were going, Semitic peoples. And so I would imagine, by the time you get
goddamn Jews, they fucked over Egypt.
and it's interesting now when they're starting to find out, we think that the people that when the Jews ascribed themselves to being in Egypt, we think that they were this group who lived, and they did leave, and it looks like this was some type of major change in power, and that this was suddenly a city that had lost power. And that they were like, oh shit, we gotta go. And you can literally, from satellites, find massive amounts of tracks going all the way straight to Jericho. So they go across the Sinai, hit Jericho, boom, take down Jericho. and all in one shot. It doesn't look like there's any 40 year or anything like that.
Yeah, well, no wonder the Egyptians were scared of these guys, because every tribe back then wanted to be the dominant, and the Jews were not dumb. They weren't pacifist. I mean, they were much more civilized, I think, because they believed in washing yourself. They believed in sexual responsibility. The pagans were pretty disgusting when you get down to it. When you really get into some of the things they believed, it was pretty fucked up. The Jews were very against that. That's why if you cheated, you'd be stoned to death, because they were like, no, you're going to fuck everything up genetically. They didn't know about genetics, but they just knew it was bad to have some woman opening her legs everywhere. But the Jews were like insurgents. They were, they were there, and they were starting to get more power, and eventually people started to realize that it was just not something that was good for them.
Well, and also one of the things that in looking at, say, Thomas Sowell talking about minorities who are middlemen, the Jewish people being that, say, Abraham being a herder, he would have been of some tradition of people that would have been spread across the region, and that the idea of people kind of centering around Jerusalem. It's not until after Moses that Jerusalem actually becomes a city that the Jews occupy as a city that is theirs, that is their capital. And so there's still this huge network of Semitic peoples that.
I'll be right back.
Oh, okay.
Just feel free to let people know a little bit more,
Oh, well, now I'm kind of stuck on stupid. So if Donovan Worland, Donovan Worland, join my channel, I have usually a link to the Discord. Discord is for dangerous ideas, news reports. I really try to use the Discord as an archive. So just feel free to join.
All right, I'm back.
All right. Well, and so with this network of sort of herding peoples, and so Joseph then establishing the 12 tribes and stuff like that, that's when really, when you look at, like sort of the way the Bible's put together, they are sort of organized once they are in Egypt and then leave Egypt. That it's story after story, like all the 12 tribes. This will come up a lot in your Masonic symbolism. The 12 tribes and their flags and their encampments, as they'll call them, and that's a beautiful thing. Those symbols are beautiful. That part of it,
or meaning wise.
Oh, I only know them mostly from people writing commentary on the right. And I think this is once you're like even past the Rose Croix degree of Scottish Rite that they get into the 12 tribes. And like they have this they just have a lot of these beautiful like all the flags, all the tents, all their regalia, all like drawn out certain ways and stuff and it's like way up there. This is like when you're getting into like the 20s of degrees or something, they start commenting on the 12 tribes. That might even be up there once you're like at 30 or 31. But that's a huge part of that symbol system. It might be a part of the Rose Croix chapter. I'm not sure, but I'd have to look again. But it's absolutely amazing.
Croix being the French word, I believe, right?
Yeah.
That's something I think is one of the people really. I think that this is a little surprising, but I think that a lot of people would agree. I think a lot of children learn the Cliff Notes version of history. They don't really learn the deeper stuff. And I understand that school should just give you a certain amount and have you find the rest out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that there's so much more that we have learned about 20 years ago or even 30.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And just like say, looking into, Freemasonry, a big part of what's happening right now, say there's a thing called the worldwide
theaters, the worldwide triple X premiere.
Anyway, it's oh my god, I can't believe it's like that's it. Worldwide exemplification of Freemasonry is a project put together by the Scottish Rite, and so there's various on Lewis Masonic. You find especially a lot of an abbreviation for a series of lectures, and a big part of it is because people had no idea. Even Freemasons had no clue about like most of the black jazz greats were Freemasons. Most of the big performers that we think of as
like Richard Pryor being a comedian, he was also a Mason.
Yes, yeah, he was a part of the Shrine. If I remember correctly, I mean we had like at least like through World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, all those presidents, I believe, were in the Shrine. And
Bush, for those who are wondering, if Bush is, no, he was part of Skull and Crossbones.
Yeah, he was that's a different fraternity. Yes, thank you.
It's a very elitist fraternity, and a lot of people, it's either one of the creepiest things I've ever heard of, or it's just a drinking group, but there's so much conflicting back and forth evidence of it.
One person has actually done some research, a guy named Terry Melanson, who is up in Canada, and his big thing is he started researching the Illuminati Lodge and the actual historical Illuminati Lodge, and his book on it is quite good. And he still keeps doing research, but his assertion is that the Skull and Bones fraternity is maybe something like the Germanin Orden or something along those lines, and that what it is Skull and Bones is just a name, and it's actually lodge number 22, that famous number that's on the skull, or whatever, that you always see the bones in the skull, 322, and he's like, no, this is probably the number of the lodge. And he's like, it's probably a fraternity just nobody knows about, because most people have no clue how many fraternities have existed, have come and gone. You know, like they only found out Scalia was in a mysterious Catholic fraternity when he died so mysteriously. You know?
Mysterious one, because I'm part of the Knights of Columbus as well. But I mean, they're fraternity as well.
Yeah. There's something, whatever Scalia was a part of, I think it's a Swiss Catholic. Oh God, it's like and it's a real odd saint that is like the saint of hunters and patron saint of hunters. And yeah, and and so I totally was like, really? And I looked it up, and it was in Wikipedia. You know, lots of other information about similar groups, you know, and stuff like that. And I was just like, hey, you know, you just never know. You know, I mean, just like in the York Rite, people don't know about all the appendant orders. You know, most people, you know, they have never heard of, like, this is fun. You got, okay, the Royal Order of Jesters. If you ever look them up on YouTube, you will find the weirdest video about a crime story when the Royal Order of Jesters, an appendant order dedicated to brotherhood and mirth, got caught running a huge network of prostitution. These guys would just get together and have like a giant, you know, whatever they called. They're like a circus, or whatever they would call their gathering, right? And they would have mirth, you know, and you just got to look it up, because you will sort of, and they have their own character, like it's the Billiken, and it's this little goblin thing with a jewel in its butthole, and you kiss the Billiken, and I mean, it is weird.
The butt plug of the time, sounds like.
Totally. But once you see this, the moment this will probably pop into your head as you see that's it. You look up the badges. When you look up the lodge badges, you will sit there and go, wait a second, this looks like the Joker and Harley Quinn. And it's suddenly so much about, like, a lot of people who are Masons know that, okay, if it was 1930 and my kid saw me getting ready for an event at the lodge, like, say, like a big deal thing, like a York Rite cryptic Mason thing, or an Odd Fellows meeting where they had the robes, the turbans, all the regalia, like the full costumes and regalia, then I'm like, yeah, a kid might think I'm dressing up like Doctor Strange. And so I'm thinking a lot of what we think of in comic books probably made sense to the people writing them, because people dressed like that. People formed organizations and dressed real weird, and they did it in secret, you know, and they had plans or something, you know, and they'd be like, brothers, blah, 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 you know, and once I started to look back over my comic books, started to look at different rites, and especially I have the encyclopedia by, not Mathers, it's one of those British Freemasons who could just insult anything so brilliantly, and but he wrote this beautiful encyclopedia on Freemasonry, and he had in there, this is hundreds of orders. Like, I mean, just
fraternity in the world, right? I think, right?
Pardon?
I think it's the largest fraternity in the world, right?
Yes, and he got into orders. I mean, stuff that you would never. I mean, you just wouldn't even think of it. I mean, basically, like funnily, the Christian Lodge. There was at some point something called the Christian Lodge system. Some Freemasons just invented it. The Order of ISIS. And I mean, these would exist like lodge.
Okay, there you go. Sorry, your internet seems to be doing something weird. It was, you know, we were geeking out a little bit, but there you go. Geeking out.
Oh, like say, like somebody might start. They would have, say, like the Order of Dionysians, or, you know, the Order of and it would last maybe 30, 40 years, and then would just vanish. You know, they'd be like in Cleveland, you know, or No, be to someplace. Somebody would start this order. It would exist. It would go out of existence. Everybody would go back to Blue Lodge. And I just thought it was funny. Like people have no idea how big of a deal that was in America, and especially men's rights, MGTOW. They at first they had no clue. It wasn't until people like Rocking Mystery and other people started coming forward about, do you know about the history of masonry? And then a lot of guys were like, yeah, but also they realized, oh shit, this is how men organized.
Back in a much more civilized time, I think this is like, I think that the fraternity was a good thing. But I also want to mention this. Have you heard about the new movie Mother?
No.
The Darren Aronofsky film?
No, I'm unfamiliar. What's it about?
Okay, so the trailer completely lies. The way it makes it look is it makes it look like Javier Bardem, who plays him. That's literally his name in the movie. That's all they address him as. Apparently is married to Jennifer Lawrence, and then they're in this house. And apparently, the trailer makes it look like it's a story of controversy and a story of maybe an unfaithful husband and that he's being abusive or whatever, and she's starting to get pissed at it. When you actually watch the movie, I saw in theaters, it is the most satanic thing I've ever seen. Literally, at the beginning, there's a crystal in the middle of the house, and all of a sudden, and the house looks kind of burns up, and the crystal starts turning, and all of a sudden the burn marks go away, and Jennifer Lawrence's character literally coalesces out of nowhere. And then, and apparently they the whole time they're playing as they're being a married couple together, and she always stays inside the house. And there's houses in the middle of the country, and there's no roads that lead directly to the house. By the way, it's just like forest and open fields and stuff. And then all of a sudden, by the end of the movie, I figured out why the left is so effective. They love to layer meaning upon meaning upon meaning, so you don't really understand what they're saying. But I figured it out. Jennifer Lawrence is Mother Nature. Javier Bardem is God. And Javier Bardem is painted as a character who doesn't care about his wife. He's a writer, apparently, that has a lot of fans, but can't think of how to continue to write his newest book. Ed Harris shows up with his wife out of nowhere. Remember, there's a lot of stuff that's not explained because they want it to look kind of otherworldly, so open to interpretation. He shows up, and apparently he's sick, dying, and wants to see Javier's character, which is him. His only name is Man. And at one point when he's puking out blood, you see that there's a giant wound in his back, and it's like around the rib area. Then his wife shows up. Of their kids show up. One of them kills the other, Abel and Cain, clearly. And the entire time they're destroying they're messing up the house. More and more people come and Javier Bardem's character keeps saying, "Oh, just let them in," and Jennifer Lawrence keeps saying, "No, don't do it. It's a bad idea. Bad idea, bad idea." And they keep coming, and he keeps letting them in, and she loves it so much she goes along with it. They start flooding the house. They start camping outside. The house apparently has an actual physical heart in it. And as the house gets more and more messed up, like people start painting over shit, people start, not picking up after themselves. And the house starts to kind of look like it's starting to go into bad shape. She also starts to look like she's getting more unhealthy. Then by the end, she asks Javier Bardem, looks at him in the eyes and says, "Okay, shoot a baby in me." And so he does. And then when they have this kid, that she's loving it, she's carrying it but then when she's not looking, Javier Bardem wants to show all of the people who are following him, and so he passes the baby around, and she's angry as hell at him. They start kissing it and loving it, but then they start ripping it up and eating it and drinking its blood, the baby, and it's really disturbing and disgusting.
Whoa.
Kristen Wiig ends up in the film, and she's in the corner shooting people in the head, just lining them up, telling them to sit there, and then she shoots them in the head over and over again, by the way. Other people are having like orgies in one area, and of course Jennifer Lawrence screams, says, "You got my baby killed." So then she starts stabbing a few people in the face for killing her kid.
Holy crap!
She goes into the this is literally the end. She goes into the basement, turns on all the furnaces, opens up the gas light, and blows up the house. And then she's pretty charred, but she's still pretty enough to be good on screen. As everyone's dying and everyone else runs away, she's carried out by Javier Bardem's character, and she says, like, why did you do this? Why did you invite them here? Or why aren't I good enough? And he's like something along the lines of, no one's ever good enough for me. And she said, and he asked, like, I need the heart to start over. Do you still have some love for me in your heart? And she says, yes. And then he literally reaches into her chest and rips out her heart physically. And she dies. Then he goes to the center of the house. The heart turns into a crystal, and then the process starts all over again, and it ends. And then I start realizing, so what you're saying?
I'm totally seeing it with you. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so demented. Like, the left is so fucked up.
They're literally equating communion, which is something Jesus voluntarily did, to physically eating. First off, I'm pretty sure it was symbolic. It was just a ritual that you did to show your love for God. And that was God's way of thinking, okay, you were willing to go through this weird ritual. Clearly you love me. But then they're saying, like, it's disgusting. Oh, if God is real, he's a tyrant, because look at how bad humanity is. Why did he create these humans? Why didn't he just kill them all off? You're like, holy shit. This is Satan. This is not even, this is like if the Church of Satan, which is inherently atheist, crossed over with devil worship, like actual devil worship.
Well, there's actually there was a lecture an Orthodox priest gave about eschatology, the end of the world, and how he was discussing the Orthodox have this view. It's similar to the Catholics, and then he had to really try to make this make sense to the Protestants, because this took a lot of study on his part to understand the Protestant view of how the world will end, because it's so vastly different than the Orthodox and the Catholics. But then he kept touching on the common view now on the atheists and the secularists. And one of the key things might have even been possibly Lord Byron or one of those types of, or Wilde or something, that he said that, how do you think the world will end? No, the guy, it might have been Orwell. How do you think the world will end? I think everybody will run out the streets and kill each other. In America,
sorry, your audio is cutting out a little bit.
That everybody will run out into the streets and kill one another is how this one, I think it was Orwell, put it. But I think that with a lot of liberals, like, say, I live around, they are absolutely certain that modern society in the West will it will be war and pollution. And that will end the species, because we're so utterly heartless. And as this movie you're describing demonstrates, the allegory that humans hate nature, that humans will naturally start just going into crazed deviance and murder, and that's really what humans do. Humans don't love their wives. Humans don't love children. Humans just can't wait to kill each other. And what I've realized, that the secular left, the liberals, that they are quite certain of this. Even Dugan has mentioned this as well, that he's like, that is their view of the end of the world, that their neighbor will come walking over and kill them.
Well, I think that they might be right, but I think that they're right for the wrong reasons. I think that here's what I think. I think it will happen, but I think they'll be the cause of it, because I think that humans are animals, but we are also more than animals. And I think that it's the inability of the right to recognize the part of us that is animal, and the inability of the left to recognize the part of us that is more intelligent than the average animal, that can aspire to greater things, that will cause the end of the world. Because without the ability to admit that you have something bad in you, you will never fix it. But to the left, it's like, they acknowledge it. They acknowledge this animalistic side, but they think that's all there is. They don't think that you have the ability to aspire to, even if you're not like, mystically religious like I am, where I actually do believe that there is an almighty being out there. If you're like Stefan Molyneux, where you're like culturally and morally religious, where you believe in everything but the deity himself, and you believe that you should obey the laws of the deity because God, there's a lot of good stuff in there, and you should try to aspire to a higher purpose. Without that, you will only be a ravenous lion or a ravenous goat or some kind of animal, unable to control your greater self. And that's, I think, what will cause the end of the world. Humans will war with each other. I don't think the environments will die off. I think the environments will just watch as we kill each other off, and then they'll be like, "Oh, hey guys, you want to have a party now?"
Totally. Actually, I like how you put that, because say one of the things that will come up. There's a Kabbalistic organization that I'll, if you just like put in Kabbalah Media, there's this organization that they do regular lectures, and one of the things that they get into with this idea of climbing Jacob's ladder is that you have all of these attributes of God, and then right below the crown you have wisdom and understanding. And that I think a big part of Stefan Molyneux is at that stage that he understands why the law is beautiful. He understands why the wisdom gives strength and order, this memory, the memory of that we have of the past. So you'll see a lot of mystics, the modern mystics of the 80s, they'll put a thing called the Akashic record. What they're referring to in the Kabbalistic tree is wisdom. The Kabbalists actually say, like, wisdom has no words like your memory. Understanding is when you apply a word or an image to the essence of that which you remember. And they said, and this is like God in, and then they go into the Adam and Eve story. There's all these, the allegory after allegory after allegory, and symbol layers and layers and layers. That's one of those things that to make that leap of faith is really this point at which you sort of have to believe in the crown, that you have to believe there is a king, something that seems to be ruling the orderliness of the universe. And I think this is something that comes out of our need for parents, our need for our need for love, our need for order. That we don't like chaos. Chaos means a man starves. A man must fight and starve or wander when chaos strikes.
There's nothing he can do about it. He is essentially helpless in a world. I think, though.
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it.
But I think that chaos is something that does need to be around. I think that, though, it will come around on its own. I don't think people should man-make it. But I do think that chaos is freedom, but order is the correct decision of what to do with that freedom. And I think that if you have both, order conquering chaos, but chaos always coming back, you will always have a purpose in life. You will always see that you continuously conquer chaos, but that chaos gives you a true purpose. If there was nothing but order from the beginning. This is why this is something interesting that I think people forget. Everyone says, well, why does God allow, mass murders and shit? I'm like, because imagine how much of a tyrant you would have to be to make everyone brainless and unable to think for themselves. That's why I think Mother's so satanic. Like, seriously, there's a YouTube channel called, it's like Ending Explained, or at least that's the name of the video series that's on this YouTube channel. I don't remember the actual name. And they literally go through the entire movie, and like everything I said is 100% true about this movie. When you look at it, it's lying about why humans are the way they are. It's saying, like, all humans are disgusting creatures that will always destroy Mother Nature, while in the Bible it says no, they were corrupted by Satan. And that's the thing. That's why I think it's so satanic. They think that it's just something that humans were born with. Well, you forget about original sin. You forget about the serpents in the Garden of Eden. It doesn't show that this is what humans are when they only think about themselves as animals, and they don't recognize that animal part, but then reconcile it with the wise king that should have been Harvey R. Bardem's character. Mother is just painted as this innocent victim, can do no wrong, Mary Sue 100% of the way.
Mother Nature is there. It's all that you nailed it. That's a good way of putting it. You know, so here's one of the things when I took a Kabbalah class that about like the whole Eve, Adam, the apple, the whole deal. And this is going to mess with a lot of people who are Christians because this is really a very common view of from Judaism that people might remember that I think it's in Deuteronomy. Mm-hmm. There's references to the kings of Edom. Mm-hmm. And so the reason it's an apocryphal book is because when discussing, well, why is there evil? And they're like, well, how could there even have been this spirit in the garden? So as this got hashed out over thousands of years by the Jews, like why would this even exist? They kind of came up with this. They were like, well, God made sure to identify this tree. He made sure that they really knew, like, see this one? Yeah, don't mess with that. Whatever you do, don't mess with that one. And just keep that in mind. And then, like, why didn't he just sit there and watch it? And why didn't he just post a guard? He could have. And so this rabbi got into it. He goes, the story had to begin. And he's like, it's our story. It's our story as his children. And he wants us to have this experience, and we can never know why. And he said, that's the beauty of it. He said, there, and it was funny because I erupted into laughter when he said this, because it just hit me it rang like a bell. We can't know why. We are mortals. We don't know why the story is being told. We don't know why God is writing it. We're not supposed to, but we are supposed to play our role. And so a part of the role was, will you pay attention to the spirit of temptation? And then he got into this time, because the stories of the kings of Edom are the worlds that failed, that Adam never ate the apple. He said in those worlds, they were so imbalanced, God just restarted the world until he had the beginning. And I was like, whoa. And he goes, I know, right? That kind of messes with your head, huh? Mm. And he said, but none of this happened within a thing we think of as time. He said, time didn't begin until Adam ate the apple. That's when suddenly humans, or this Hava, Eve, life, and Adam, the creature, suddenly exist in what we call creation. And that's why they used a capital C back in the day, is that there was something that was not creation, and that God sort of is there. He's beyond creation, so he's in a place that's outside of it almost.
So few people understand this, but perhaps for those people who are just really, really confused, allow me to explain this. First off, quantum mechanics shows that there are plenty of possibilities that any kind of creature could be out there. Think about this. We are able to perceive 3 dimensions. Animals that can perceive only 2 will never be able to understand what we can understand. Put one more dimension there for just a normal human being as unoppressive. Well, let's take someone like Stefan Molyneux, just a very middle-of-the-road, run-of-the-mill person, beyond being very good at philosophy. Let's just give him the ability to receive 4 physical dimensions, by the way. Imagine how much more he could understand in a we could never. Now imagine an omniscient being that could perceive the theorized infinitum that is a physical existence, just physical existence by itself. Imagine that. And imagine all of a sudden trying to comprehend what they're doing. People have a hard time thinking of that too, so I'll say this. What is H.P. Lovecraft's main novels about? What is Cthulhu? Cthulhu, even though it's not Christianity, and so, this is not saying Christianity was inspired by Cthulhu. Don't take it like that. I just mean, the point of those horror stories is that it's so horrifying to think of something that is so far more intelligent and beyond human comprehension that we can't stop it, and we don't know how to, even interact with it, because we don't even know why it's doing what it's doing. We don't even know what evil is in its eyes and what good is in its eyes. We don't understand what it's going to do, to the point where even our own destruction could be good or evil. Imagine that, but put Jehovah as the name instead, except not terrifying, but kind of loving and really easy to understand. That's something that nobody wants to acknowledge, is that, first off, quantum mechanics tells us that time, we only perceive it as linear. It could be a circle. It could be so many things beyond us. So imagine that being what time is, and that's only after time started. And before that, before creation, there was no time. Imagine a creature who can manipulate this. Do you ever think you're ever going to be able to understand this? The best allegory I've ever heard for this is, you ever see ants over underneath a highway? Okay. What about all the people constructing the highway, the purpose behind the highway, the technology that's going to run on the highway, and which includes the cars, the places that they're going, the symbolism of the highway? Now imagine us, and we're the ants, and the highway is the universe. We'll never really understand God, so let's just go with what he says. What else could we do, right?
And I think that our Lord gave to the nations this concept of the nations, all the people who, after Noah, there was all these people spread all over the place. And the idea is that the nations, God gave the Jews 10 commandments, but he gave 7 of those same commandments to all nations. And so there's these things, the Noahide laws. Now, people will say these aren't legit, that they were formulated later. I'll totally grant that. But my whole thing that really hit me about with the Christian tradition, and he basically, suddenly everybody had this presented to them, that there is a unity. This unity can be talked to. He wants you to talk to him like you are his parent, or that you're his child. He's your parent. He wants to hear you just talk to him, just like any parent loves hearing their kid just kind of yammer, because they're these that they can't help it. You are your parent's child. And when the rabbi, he's a rabbi, but when I would reflect on so what was the Nazarene trying to get across to people, these normal people of a Syrian, Jewish, Greek milieu, and so I was like, yeah, that you did.
Oh boy, can you still hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, gotcha.
Oh my god. Okay, so because as I accidentally unplugged my microphone, please work. Here we go. It does something weird where it doesn't. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, there is a God. He likes us talking good about him, so he helped me.
No. But I mean, just this idea of like that, and actually, how do we pray? That question, I thought that was very interesting. That the apostles asked, "What should we do?" They had endless rites. The Jews have prayers for every meal, for using the bathroom, going to sleep, waking up from sleep. Like, there is a prayer for everything. And that he was saying to them, here's one, and he gave the prayer to, the Our Father, simple, easy, and then how will we be judged? Gives a simple list, and that it's really this thing of, why don't you be good to your siblings and be thankful to your father? It's, and I find it interesting that to this day, the Christian community, people are still writing books on how. So it obviously is a challenge.
I mean, I think that, and you know what? Hey, have you ever heard of the show One Punch Man?
Okay, I've heard of it, and there's memes, but I have never seen a whole episode.
Okay, so it's based, for those who don't know. Do you know what it is? Because if you don't, I'll just explain it. But I'll explain it.
I don't really know.
Okay, One Punch Man is a parody series. It's an anime series that basically lampoons all the different like tropes in anime. And so the primary focus of the troping is on the character Saitama. And Saitama is the main character. He is a self-made superhero, and the thing is, he destroys all of his enemies, no matter how powerful they are, with one punch. And so the idea is like, oh shit, what do we do now? And the thing is, when you examine it farther and farther, you start to see some of the symbolism of why he's so powerful. He's bald. He has a very deadfish stare. The way he talks is not very enthusiastic, and he's always very chill and relaxed. The thing is, you spend about, I think, like 45% of the show with him, but the rest of the time it's focused on side characters that are not nearly as powerful, and that you see them get all lathered up and face challenge after challenge, and then when they face their biggest challenge of all, Saitama comes in at the last minute, just renders the challenge completely pointless, and it's usually done completely for comedic effect. It's done for a laugh. It's hilarious, actually. I love the show so much because it's just so funny. Both the English dub, yes, go ahead, haters, hate me for saying I like the English dub, fuck you, and the subbed version too. But the thing is, when you look at how bored Saitama is, he's boring. Everything about him is boring, but it's really on purpose. He does 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squash, and a 5-kilometer run every single day, over and over again, and never changes his routine. And everything else he does is like so full of comfort. And the thing is the whole point of it is to show that as society becomes more and more comfortable, we start to lose the real happiness that we have. We start to lose, like Saitama is an example of the average everyday American and person in the first world who just tries to Netflix and chill, doesn't want to face any real challenges, doesn't want to face the demons, and just, you know, gets everything so easily. Everything has become easily. Like the first fight he ever did was the only one he really, really, really felt happy about, because it was just back when he was just this average dude who was facing up against a giant crab monster. He had no powers, and so when he gets the crap beaten out of him, but while he does, he's still fighting the monster, and finally he gets the jump on him and kills him, and you can see the intensity in his eyes. He's like, oh, I'm so happy. I defeated this giant crab monster. But then all of a sudden, like they cut to him in a store in his superhero costume, being bald and everything, and he's buying pre-packaged crab.
Yes.
You know, sometimes you shouldn't want comfort all the time. Sometimes you should just want accomplishments, you know? And I think that when it comes to the story of the Bible, the story, like everyone says, why would God let hurricanes be on Earth? Because once technology gets so advanced and that's no longer a challenge, we need that. We need chaos to conquer. We need to overcome adversity. And so within nature, he put in the very, very essence of what we need to truly have a meaningful life. Disasters, chaos, and things we have to overcome. That's why it's so beautiful. It's so tragic. It's so bittersweet to see a hurricane go through a place, because you see the innocent victims and you feel so bad for them. But then you realize so does everyone in that community feel bad for each other, and they all work together, and it's just one of the most beautiful things ever.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, it's one of the things actually that comes up about good and evil in, say, the Sefer Yetzirah is this idea of there is good at the heights, there is good, at the depths there is evil, and man is made to choose in between. And they actually think of it similar to breathing, and that every breath you have a choice to make whether you will go with the I think it's called Yetzer Hara, the evil intention, or you will follow the path of righteousness. And that you every minute, every breath, actually every single this opportunity to make this choice. And that to some degree that I've actually found that there's some people who have criticized this in a way of that it's the idea of like, oh, this Babylonian and the Satan and this and that. And my thing is, but that really is the condition of a human. And I think to some degree the Christian tradition being a little hardcore, like the Jewish tradition, there's a lot of yes, but but you could look at it this way, and you could look at it this way. And with the Christian tradition, it's more like you're a soldier. You're either going to keep marching or you're going to be distracted. And what are you distracted by? Soldier, keep marching. You know, it is very much especially with Catholicism, you know, the Roman point of view of there's forward way, and they will take you down to disaster and danger. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I think that there's only one true path that God does not want you to go on, because He knows you can and when it comes to evil, people will, if they're consumed by it, they will die off. But if they're consumed by it temporarily, they'll always look at it and say, "Oh God, that was so horrible. What I did was awful." You know, a lot of like people in the Communist Party were just appalled at what they did. So there's always a rebound between good and evil. There's always a going back and forth. The one path He says to not go on is the path of avoidance, the path where you avoid good and evil altogether. That's the comfort. That's the feeling of, you know, forget about challenge, about giving into temptation, feeling bad, then trying to do something righteous and follow a righteous path, fighting chaos, you know, and trying to promote good, but knowing that there's chaos in you. The one path He doesn't want you to go on is, screw that. I'm gonna watch Narcos now and masturbate to porn.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea of I can't believe that the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince man he didn't exist, and that kind of goes with this idea of evil's not real, you know, and that people will. That's what got me. That's what actually hit me, is when it was Stefan Molyneux, when he was presenting enough about philosophy that he's like, you have to know thyself. And I was like, and then when he started to map out logically, if you agree with these things, how can you disagree with this horrible conclusion that logically follows? And I started to have to reanalyze no matter my kind of mystical thinking at the time, bit of Taoism, bit of Buddhism, philosophy. I was like, dude, you don't believe in evil. You're not really facing that, you know, evil exists, because you've met people who have done evil things that have looked you in the face and told you there's something out there and it's worse than anything I've ever done. And then finally, it really, like, I had to accept that. It made me recapitulate my life. I actually got in touch with people I hadn't been in touch with in a long time, that I was like, you were right. Evil exists. And everything made much more sense once I realized there is and it was really then books started to fall off the shelf. I mean, it really was God's like, here, you were looking for this book, you know, and I was like, oh, how about that? And it was like, He made the depths so that they're far away, and in those depths is evil. And, you know, and that's why the concept actually to return, repent, the word it actually is referring to in Hebrew means return. And so that's the idea, is is forgotten. And like Freemasons, something has been forgotten, it has been lost, and it must be, you must back, you know, and you have to seek it out with your brother's aid. Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful way of dealing with the human condition. And yeah.
And do you think that's why think about this? Our society, while we may not be a theocracy anymore that's based on Christianity, the Christian faith has outlived every other faith. And like I was saying before about for instance, the Greeks and the Romans had tons of open orgies, and, you know, they thought that, oh, it feels so good, you know, therefore it's just, you know, therefore you should just do it. You know, sex with animals, there was so much permitted. And they said, well, it's not about good or evil, it's about, you know, not upsetting whatever God you wanted to worship at that time. It was about, you know, facing, you know, a person of opinions that you could sway and that was flawed. All these gods were oftentimes based on the flaws of man. There was no concept of this is universally wrong no matter who you're talking to, even if they agree with you. There was, you know, and when you look at like the Hollywood elites, like you know, the Pizzagate scandal, the Harvey Weinsteins, and all these feminist groups that say like, you know, like lay with others, you know, eat as much as you want and smoke, do whatever you want. There is no wrong, there is no right. If it feels good, it's from nature, it must be good. Is actually, I think, like the direct worker of the devil was like, you know, you said earlier, the devil tried to trick. So like, was it Adam? I think Adam.
Eve. It was that he fooled. It was the vanity of Eve, is what some people say, but literally her name is the word for life, like the living world. And that's why I think it's such a fascinating allegorical thing that all living things want that which is beautiful and sweet. They want the knowledge. They want these things because it's like, well, I can have it, you know.
Why not? But you know, but then like, you know, Adam is her complementary thing, the complementary part of it. And that's why I think it's so satanic, that movie, because, you know, there's a lot of dark stuff in Hollywood, but this is absolutely like what the left was trying to do is, see, without women, you have something like Islam. Islam is extremely strict, irrational, and but at the same time, feminism is its counterparts that is also irrational. But, you know, it's the complementary male and female of Christianity that gives balance to the world. The idea is that, you know, women, you know, like, you know, fertility, they give birth to the world, that things that are natural are not something you should be afraid of. Then there's the male side that says, no, but you should be in control of yourself. You know, kind of the way that, like, if people say, oh my God, I don't want to, like, if, like, you know, I was told a long time ago that if I ever smoke marijuana once, I'm going to die. It's a little irrational. That's where, like, you know, like the woman part would say, no, it's from the earth. It's not inherently bad. And then like the male side would say, no, but it can be used bad. So have, you know, this is why I think, do you know Styx, you know, Styx XXX Hammer? Yeah, he talked about how for him, Satanism, he wasn't ashamed of going into it. He said, but it was just a stage. It was like, you know, going into the left-hand path to get rid of irrational fear. But now I want to go to the right and then hone, you know, my understanding of the world. You know, for him, you know, that's what it was like for me. I went atheist for a long time, for like 2 years when I was in my teens, because I just generally thought this is bullshit. How could God possibly exist? Then all of a sudden someone gave me a reason to believe, so I got rid of all my irrational beliefs, but then I replaced them with rational ones. You know, the throwing, you know, the feminism, no wonder they're so celebratory of Islam. They want to pretend, oh my God, men are all evil. Oh my God, he's brown. He's telling me what to do. I need him. You know, they don't want to admit that they need each other, that it's a complementary wing. Like two wings of different sizes, but of equal value, different function, all make the bird fly, you know?
Mm-hmm. There's actually something only about 2 days ago that I find this out. So I've been following a number of scholars on Islam that are mostly like, they can read Arabic, they know all that stuff, but they're Christians, and they're Christians that specifically convert former Muslims, and they're kind of famous. They made a big to-do at Speaker's Corner about a year or two ago, where they presented yeah. So this is the best part. They presented to the Muslims at Speaker's Corner 25 Qurans. There's supposed to be one Quran. This Quran was fundamentally codified in 1924 in Egypt. I would figure, judging from that time and what I know of the milieu, the Muslim Brotherhood would have been like forming at about this time. This is when you're getting the like Islamic fascists forming, and this is also when Cairo has lodges. There's lodges all over the Islamic world at this time. It's kind of interesting. And so what ends up happening is the Quran is codified in 1924, but it turns out that this the channel is PFANDER Films, Fander Films, and they're up to 31 different Qurans that have up to 7,000 differences And I mean, once you permute the differences, like this word is in 5 of them, but it's translated differently in these 4, and it's, you know, that kind of thing. But actually, I'm still not saying it correctly. It's not translated. These are all in Arabic.
Oh.
They're all the same consonants. It's just that the way that somehow they've had all of their little vowel lines and accents put together, they all read differently. And this is the secret no one's supposed to know about Islam. That Islam actually has, that when everyone talks about, oh, so many translate, literally almost every criticism of the biblical, the Judaism and Christianity, there's a number of criticisms. They hate women. The God is so cruel. There's so many translations mistranslated, blah, blah, blah. Okay, once I started to look into it, you have basically, up until the Protestants, you really only have maybe about 4 versions of the Bible that would be widely, you know, or in Christendom. You have 4 versions. With the Jews, the Torah is literally the same every single time it's written. To the point where it's actually amazing that there's people who can write it almost from end to end. And what I ended up finding, and that they have to memorize the vowels. They have to memorize, it's only consonants. You have to memorize the vowels. And so when I looked, this guy who got into Fander Films got into Islam, and they started really getting into this. They're like, we have no record of a guy named Muhammad until this is written in the Dome of the Rock. And that is this many years after Muhammad is dead. Then
I think you just made my brain splat on the side of the wall.
Mm-hmm. Everybody, that Mecca's the holy city, right? And that all mosques face Mecca.
Yeah.
All mosques do not face Mecca. There's a bunch of the early mosques that face first Petra. Then there's an earthquake in Petra. They take the holy stone of Petra and take it to someplace else. And as the years go on, mosques keep facing slightly more toward Mecca until finally Mecca is supposedly this and it's supposed to be a part of some great set of stories and this and that. Mecca was an unknown place. It practically didn't exist. It was like this tiny little trading hub that barely existed. And so now there's people who are saying, we don't know if there was ever a Muhammad. It looks like this is only the worship of a black meteorite. It looks like the Dome of the Rock was built simply to intimidate the Jews and Christians. It's like all these things that these people are like breaking down, and the beauty of it is they are beautiful. They are just sick and wrong literate in Arabic. And like they know all the terminology. They know everything. I'm just sitting there just amazed at this. And they're even saying, they're like, this has only recently come to light. In that part of the world, it is death to even do this kind of inquiry. You know, that like no Muslim can if you're a Muslim and you agree with these guys, your life is over. You know, look at Salman Rushdie. And so it's like, they're like, no, we probably will never get a Muslim to agree with us. This is going to be a piece of scholarship that will only Christians will know about. And he's and a bunch of you with apologetics, Acts 17 apologetics. He actually he knows this guy. You've seen him if you watch David Wood's channel. You've seen the guy from Fander Films who did all of this scholarship, and this will explain, I think, a lot once you find out sort of the history of the French lodges, German lodges and British lodges in the Islamic world. And that was when a lot of Freemasons were spies, and the Orientalist period. And so that'll come up a lot. Oh, whoa, what happened? Your audio. Oh, no, your audio's dead. Okay. See, we talked about Islam. That's what happened. That's what. Okay. Here, let's cut it here. Hit you up. All right, I'll talk to you in a bit.